Welcome to Local Football Flavor. All NFL fans have had this experience at least once in their life where they're watching a national pundit or watching a broadcast, and somewhere in the conversation, they're flat out lied to. The national guy doesn't have enough time to know all the ins and outs of your local team. And as a result, as we're getting our national media and the other markets from these types of guys, we're getting incomplete and sometimes just flat out wrong information, which is not good when we're trying to make fantasy teams or make bets. So the point of Local Football Flavor is to find out from locals what's going on with their team, get educated opinions about what actually is going to happen, what their team normally does, and how to grow and make ourselves better on the fantasy wires, in our drafts, in our bets, and overall have a better enjoyment of the game. In today's episode, we're going to be talking to a guy who's from Pittsburgh, who wants to relive the glory days of Cower Power and how he liked them more than Tomlin and how he thinks Tomlin's, bringing it down, as well as how the wide receiving core, who to pick from there from the fantasy room, and how to make the overall knowledge about the Pittsburgh Steelers brighter for you and for everyone around you. Here's Local Football Flavor. Welcome to Local Football Flavor, where we talk to local fans to get the real information of what's going on with their team. And welcome. Here we are today for the first episode, talking here with Bob Hiteshew. And Bob, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you lived your life as being a Steelers fan and what makes you worthy to let us know you know stuff about the Steelers?
I mean, it's a really a born again journey there, Joe, because back in the 1990s when our savior Cordell Stewart was there with Tommy Maddox, it was a really intense time. I mean, we were in elementary school, going up into high school after a while, and it was just something that you did because your parents liked football, or a friend of a friend liked football. So growing up in Pittsburgh, you had to like the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? I mean, there was no way around it. You had an uncle, you had a dad, you had, someone who was there rooting on the Steelers every Sunday. I mean, personally, in my family, my dad hated the Steelers, right? So he was a Minnesota Vikings fan. I mean,
what?
Honestly, I think it was because of all the offensive linemen, to tell you the truth, all the corn-fed people from Nebraska. But it's just one of those things where he liked the Steelers for a while. He was more of a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, and then I just was like, what's going on here? So after we lose that Super Bowl and Neil O'Donnell was just crushing everybody's dreams, it was time for me to make my great escape. I stopped watching the Steelers, and it was one of those things where once I started to get older in high school and college, we started talking about Madden, playing NCAA, and thinking about, players at that point in time. So I didn't really have a favorite team. It was more like I had a favorite player. So I liked Deuce McAllister. I liked, Vince Young. And so whenever those players came out into the pros, I started liking those teams a lot. And so that's how, I started liking like the Detroit Lions when nobody should have liked the Detroit Lions. That's how I started liking the Cincinnati Bengals when nobody in their right mind would have enjoyed a Cincinnati Bengals game ever. But it was around like, the 2010s, Ben Roethlisberger starts coming in, and we start to see that resurgence of what we saw under Bill Cowher. And, it was exciting. The Steelers were back in the playoffs. We had Super Bowl championships. We had good players. We had interesting players that, you would want to draft on a fantasy football team, players that you think would, be around for a long period of time, and you didn't have to worry about Tommy Maddox and go into the XFL. So you had a team and you had somebody that you could get behind. So, I would go to a couple games here and there, Steelers versus Cincinnati. I'd go, I went to a couple preseason games, Steelers versus the Panthers. And it was just exciting to see the crowd and exciting to see, how my friends would react to things like that. A couple guys trips, we, try to organize ourselves to go to football games. And it just feels that when you watch a Steelers game, there's just something else there. The fan base is just even when they suck really, really bad, they're still there criticizing. They're still there saying, a 24-21 loss to the Browns ain't that bad. But realistically, it is bad. But you could get around it. And to be a Steelers fan in a hometown, it's just a different experience rather than being a fan of a different team in that hometown of a team. So, I mean, this is coming from a born again Steelers fan. I mean, there's no way around it. It's not, I wasn't a ride or die for a long time, but now it's like, I want to see them successful. I'm excited for future prospects, but with Ben Roethlisberger going and retiring, you got to think, what are the prospects? What is this team going to look like, right?
Yeah, and that's obviously the main point of this offseason is living after Ben. So as we kind of get into your local thoughts of the overall team here, I think you have to start with Ben, right? So he busts his arm up, in 2019. He's out, and then the tryout of Mason Rudolph happens. He ends up getting concussed twice during that season, once by Baltimore, once by Cleveland. And so obviously he can't really show what he is. But the Steelers still made the playoffs that year, or at least were the 7th seed that year, just before 17's made the playoffs.
I mean, let's be honest here, Joe. The Steelers are a team that they ride a quarterback till it's in the ground. I mean, when you look at it, you look in the past at Cordell Stewart, you even look at Tommy Maddox, you look at Neil O'Donnell, right? Those guys were around and they rode those arms until they were down. And then, some games, you get a Bruce Gradkowski or something like that. But I mean, that was only when they were hurt. And so when you look at what the Steelers have on their roster right now, you have 3 young, capable quarterbacks. I mean, 27 is getting older, but when you look at the lifespan of a quarterback and you look at a guy like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, these guys can go much, much longer than a running back or a wide receiver.
Yeah, this is the game over for a running back, but it's the start of the life of a quarterback at 27.
And so you're looking at three guys. Now, I don't like the Panthers. I don't like Pitt, but you look at Kenny Pickett, you look at Mitch Trubisky, you look at Mason Rudolph. You have 3 very competitive players. You have 3 players that, I mean, to be honest with you, we don't really know what we're going to get. Mitch Trubisky has had some ups and downs. I think personally he should be the starter. I think that he's a great quarterback. His stats might not always back that up, but he hasn't always been on the best teams. And if you look at what the Steelers have in the skill positions that are starting, you have players that are actually pretty good, all things withstanding, depending on, what defense they're playing. But when you look at these 3 guys, I think you have 3 good options, and one of them is going to be the guy the next 5 years. One of them has to hit.
So you're basically saying whoever starts this year is just pencil them in forever.
I'm saying, I'm saying that if one of these guys, notwithstanding an injury, right, a catastrophic injury, which, you never know what could happen. But when you have these 3 guys, whatever one you hit, whatever one you feel the best in, that's going to be the guy over the next 5 years, because you saw that even as Ben was declining just a little bit in arm strength and decision making, they wouldn't bench him. They wouldn't put him anywhere else. And so if Mason Rudolph's the guy, then he's the guy. If Kenny Pickett's the guy, then he's the guy. If Mitch Trubisky's the guy, then he's the guy. The thing that the fan base is really wanting to know is who was the guy, because they want to buy the jersey, right? They want to get settled in. They want to know their new person, because like I said, you're going to get to know them a long time. And so is Mitch Trubisky a transition player like a lot of people in the community think? Are we going to be a rabid Kenny Pickett, small hands team for the rest of our life? I don't know. But in the next 5 years, we're gonna see one of these guys for a significant period of time, because they're not going to go out and get another quarterback. There's no way.
That's not the Steelers way. That's true.
It doesn't vibe with what they have. Now, the heyday of Ben was under Bruce Arians, right? So as much as people say, Bruce Arians was not great, not good, whatever you have it, he knew how to coach a quarterback.
He
And
also let Ben get murdered.
that's true, but he knew how to get his statistics up. Now, do statistics always win games? I mean, there are certain statistics that do, but these three guys aren't going to be able to take punishment. It's not going to happen. They're not built like Ben. They're not built like
Well, with the compared to Ben, with the exception of Cam Newton, whoever has been built to take punishment.
I mean, nobody really, but there's escapability. There's you can take hits and last longer. Like I was saying, a lot of quarterbacks are lasting longer in the league if you can prove that you can take a hit and if you can prove that you can stay in the game, right? Now, with these three guys, there's injury concern. There's, small. I'm a short guy. It's can they take the wrath? And what are the Steelers doing on the offensive line is the better question here to protect these guys, because Ben could make moves. Ben could make good decisions when he was younger, when he was under Bruce Arians. They let it fly. That he had some of his best seasons ever, but he also could escape the pressure sometimes. He also could get out of the pocket and make some moves. Can these three guys do that? I mean, history is not kind to Mitch, and history is not kind to Rudolph as well. And
well, they're not kind to him in terms of their passing ratings. The one thing that they have that the Steelers just have in general throughout the years is they have winning records. And actually, Football Outsiders, rather, who's a very deep analytically based site, uses math to figure out how many games should you win each year. And during the year Ben got hurt, and then the 2 years of Ben's rapid decline, they projected us only to win 24 and a half games, or the Steelers rather. And they ended up winning 29 games. So at the end of the day, when we look at teams compared to what the math says you should win, but what actually happens over that 3 year span, the Steelers are the third or the fourth best in that department. So you see that the Packers win more than they should. But the team I want to highlight under there, other than just the Steelers winning more than they should, is the Dolphins, because Flores, who was paid to lose, had a roster that should have lost. To only win 17 games over the span of 3 years is 6 1/3 games a year. So that showing him that he's been able to hold that out, that's a great steal for the defense to get his part of your team there. So I bring that up that nationally, everyone's saying that the Steelers are going to have a team that doesn't know how to throw it, doesn't know how to do anything. But you also can make the argument that for the last 3 years, they really haven't had the capability to run an offense, just an offense. Ben led the league in quickest out of his hand. And in each of the last 2 years, as you look at his advanced metrics, again, from Football Outsiders and their DVOA metrics, that he has gotten worse dramatically in the second half of the season compared to the first half of the season. And now we're going to have someone in who's younger, who theoretically will not age out. And I do keep saying we because I'm a Steelers person too, if you haven't noticed by my background. So that's really my question is, we got Pickett here who has double jointedness, but for some reason his thumb is like a crocodile. It can close real quick, but it cannot open. So whenever he put it on the table at the combine, it looks really small. But if he manually pulls his thumb out, he's right back in the range of every other quarterback who's ever been fined. It's just a weird biological thingy. I don't know how else to say that. And the other two, Trubisky has a winning record, and he had a winning record in Chicago. I mean, they're Chicago, man.
It's kind of gross.
It is. And Rudolph had a winning record here. So you can actually, I would make the argument just based upon resume entering the season that Trubisky's resume is vastly better than Rudolph's, because at the end of the day, Trubisky did it with Nagy and Rudolph did it with Tomlin. Tomlin just finds ways to win, even if it's not statistically happy. And it reminds me of back in the days with Fast Willie Parker when he had the league lead in rushing around week 14. And he didn't give him the ball hardly at all in week 15. And he starts making this big complaint about how Willie's not going to win the rushing title and all that. And Tomlin came out in his press conference, which to me sums up the entire Steeler way, says, I walk to my office every day. I walk past 6 Lombardi trophies. I don't walk past rushing titles. We don't care about those in Pittsburgh. So at the end of the day, yes, Arians got stats. He famously said on his firing interview, I gave you 2 or 3 1,000-yard receivers at 1,000-yard running back, and you're not happy. And at the end of the day, things are measured in rings around here. So that's ultimately why I personally think that Trubisky is going to get the nod. Also because he's only 2 years older than the rookie they just drafted, but he's already have a winning record and 4 years of experience in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So, Pitt, while it's in the same building and they get to see him practice all the time, is that really better than the guy who has already proven it with a completely incompetent coaching staff? Which, by the way, Chicago, when we get to you, one of you guys can try to defend Nagy. Good luck. But so before we switch to defense, because I know that can be its entire story over there. As we look at how you avoid pressure with a line that's bad, it's historically the quick passing game. And that's all Ben did last year. And that's all the offense really was, but they struggled to score. Mm-hmm. So what did the Steelers do this year, aside from obviously changing the quarterback, which is the wildest of wild cards? What do they have in place to keep teams from just crashing the box and keep things from basically overwhelming the line of scrimmage?
I mean, the horrible thing is that nothing much has changed. And to be honest, that tends to be the Steelers' MO, is that once they find a couple guys that they like, and once they find a couple things that, go well, they tend to overstay their welcome to the point where it's not feasible anymore that should be your starter, right? But I'm not saying that any of the starters right now are bad, but it hasn't necessarily gotten better, because we're looking at a guy like Najee. Najee's a great player, but if you look at his fantasy numbers, at least from last year, right? He topped off. That is a great season. And
12,000 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. Yeah.
Is that his cap? Is that something that he can do better at, is the question, right?
Well, so I would argue with seeing how bad the offensive line was, to put up 1,200 yards is incredible.
Right. I mean, that's really, really good. And so are we looking at, I'm trying to pull up, I need some names here from the offensive linemen, because, we don't really get offensive lineman names much here.
Sure. So it's right to left. It's Chukako. It's Chooks. I can never say his name right. And then you have next to him the guy that we just brought in, Daniels from Chicago. Then we have the center that just came in from Minnesota, who I'm blanking on his name right now. The left guard tackle is the debate or the battle between Dotson and Green. Dotson, who was the 4th-round pick 2 years ago, and Green, who was the 3rd-round pick last year. And then Texas A&M is on the far left. So
all right, so we're looking at a brand new set of offensive linemen here. Basically,
essentially, they're all young is the thing.
Yeah. So you're looking at a whole retooled offensive line. So when you look at a guy like Najee, who last year lit it up, you kind of want to see, is he going to do it again? Because, Benny Snell, Anthony McFarland, they don't really give you excitement, right? Benny Snell is who he is. I mean, but it's nothing that I'm going to write home about or, be excited to tune in every week to watch, right? Najee needs to perform better. If you think he can do that better, or at the same pace as he did last year. But even though he performed that well last year, the Steelers still couldn't score. So when I look at it and I say, okay, you're retooling your offensive line, your running back had one of the best seasons of a Steelers running back in the last couple of years.
I was a rookie for sure, yeah.
And
he's right there with Le'Veon's.
And you still couldn't score. So the issue is that let's look at the wide receivers. You got Deontay Johnson, who is a perfectly capable wide receiver. He's really phenomenal. You look at Chase Claypool. You know, he should have done better last year. But where's the ball going? Well, last year you had Juju, you had Deontay, you had Chase. When Ben likes a guy, Ben just peppered that guy, right? And you just get him. Is Mitch going to spread the ball around? Because you've also got George Pickens. You know, you look at a guy, you look at their fourth and fifth wide receiver at this moment in time, you know, during camp, and you have a guy named Kelvin Austin. That's a rook, right? You know, you have Miles Boykin from Notre Dame. But those top three guys, Pickens, Claypool, and Johnson, Trubisky's got to get them the ball, and you've got to rely on them to make their moves, because Claypool as a rookie had a phenomenal rookie season. Then as a second-year player, he put up basically the same statistics. He almost had the same number of catches, the same amount of yards, and he only had two touchdowns. You know how I know that? He was on my fantasy team.
Yeah, both years, I'm assuming.
Right?
Yeah.
Two. So what in the world happened in terms of, you know, red zone offense? What in the world is going on when you have a fantasy wide receiver like Deontay Johnson, who's ranked this year is 10?
So to answer that question,
but last year, they barely put it in the end zone.
Yeah. So analytically, it really was the story of 2020 rather than 2021. So in 2020, when Ben was first coming back from the injury, the Steelers' first game of the year was against Buffalo. And Ben aired it out, and he was throwing the ball downfield. And I believe it was about week 4 or 5 of that season, we went to Cincinnati, and Claypool scored a touchdown each quarter, and the entire fan base went insane. But a lot of those were deep throws, and Ben was still throwing the ball downfield. That was also the year COVID attacked the NFL, and the Steelers ended up playing some 4 games in 17 days because they kept pushing back the game against the Ravens in Baltimore. So we had a ton of rest going into that game. But during that game, Baltimore does what Baltimore does. They expose whatever's wrong. And they expose the fact that Ben, if he got hit, he would not throw the ball downfield again. And it was really the beginning of that game when the Steelers were 11-0 going into Baltimore. They won that game. They won 12-0. And then we lost 5 of the next 6 because it became painfully obvious that if Ben got hit, Ben didn't want to throw the ball downfield. And that's why it kept being released real quick. So we look last year with Claypool, what's the real difference with his touchdown rates? He's a downfield touchdown scorer. Ben's not willing to throw the ball downfield. And you also added both Najee Harris, who can catch the ball out of the backfield, and you're adding Freiermuth, which they didn't really have a tight end 2 years ago. And Freiermuth took a lot of that action and a lot of those activity. So as you really look at it, to me, it kind of comes full circle with what you said here about the offense is, will the new guy throw the ball downfield? Because if he does, Claypool's open for business. And if he doesn't, we're done. But also, it's also mathematically impossible to throw the ball shorter than Ben did. And the only person who was worse than this was Tua in Miami. And every single pass for both of them was at the line of scrimmage, normally to someone standing still. And that's how Deontay Johnson racked up all of his catches. He was in the slot. He could make one guy miss, and our offense became Najee to the right, Johnson screen to the left. It was really predictable, and the fact that Tomlin got them into the playoffs is a miracle. That being said, the Steelers are returning the same offensive coordinator, so he says everything will change with a new quarterback and that Ben didn't let him play what he wanted to do. But that's yet to be seen if that actually will be successful with the Matt Canada offense. So,
right, and I'm going to go back to that Detroit game. You have Deontay Johnson with 13 targets. Okay, Claypool either was hurt or didn't play in that game, and your next best wide receiver up, because Juju was also hurt, was James Washington. Right, so you're looking at
James Washington's the number 2 starter in Dallas right now. All right.
And that's a little weird to me, right? Because he's not that great. He's perfectly fine, but not that great. It's just when you look at the Steelers wide receivers and you look at the amount of targets they had last year, and this is the thing that's a little bit scary. You're looking at Claypool's targets, 105 targets. He had 59 catches, 105 targets, 59 catches, 2 touchdowns.
That and look at the fact,
and he had 14 yards per reception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
no, it really is that. Is if you're not separating the field for him by testing the downfield, he's not as valuable. The other thing that was dramatically different between Claypool in his rookie year and second year that doesn't come up in statistics was in his rookie year, he got a ton of pass interference against him. And that just didn't happen, again, because there wasn't many opportunities because the ball wasn't getting thrown downfield. But that's also a weapon that for those who are looking to fantasy, which we'll do a specific fantasy section here on the other side of the break, that you didn't really break into, is that he might not catch the deep ball, but he'll get the flag. So the Steelers offense is still moving downfield, but your fantasy team isn't getting any points.
Right. But but that's what I'm saying though. I'm not even speaking from a fantasy perspective. I'm speaking from just a getting down the field perspective. You look at, Deontay's numbers last year, 169 targets, 107 catches, 8 touchdowns, 10 yards per reception. Why couldn't they score? Like, you have 2 guys that arguably their yards per reception were were phenomenal. 14 yards, 10 yards. That's a first down every time those people are catching the ball. And you could not put it in the end zone. And if you look at Pat Freiermuth, right? If you look at the tight end, you're looking at a tight end who has the potential to be better than Heath Miller was for us for so many years. And he had 79 targets, 60 receptions, and 8 yards per reception. So the fact that the Steelers felt like, watching the games last year, it felt like they always had a hard time getting into the end zone. And it worries me, not the players, skill position players. It looks like you're retooling the offensive line, but the coach, that it brings us back to Tomlin in Canada again. You have players that can get you down the field, get you into the red zone, and you put up 16 points against Detroit. You make it a game against the Chicago Bears. You make a game against Baltimore last year, and Baltimore wasn't, they were what they were. They were okay, right?
So they were injured. And actually, it's as you're saying in those games, the Bears in particular, but Baltimore as well, gets to the shining light about why we did win those games. And the answer is Mr. TJ Watt, because TJ Watt single-handedly beat Chicago in that night game. The guy just made every single turnover in the fourth quarter and said, "We're not losing this game because I say so." And when we look at that defense, I mean, for to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and to be half an hour in and only bring up the defense really now really shows how much the quarterback turnover is affecting this team. But this
it really shows how much that us in Pittsburgh really, as much as we say we love defense,
We're
as
taking it
much
for
as we
granted.
say we love it, we just as much complain about the offense being, even when the offense is really, really good, right? We still complain about it. We still are like, oh, that could have been better. Oh, and when the defense is doing good, oh, it was Ben. Ben carried us through when the defense was struggling. Now, that begs the question is, if the defense struggles like a couple games that they did last year to contain, against like the Chargers, they lost 41-37, right?
Mhm.
That
That
was
was
a
the
win.
game where Herbert proved he could run because
That
he was
was a
constantly
winnable.
running away from Cam Heyward and TJ.
That was a winnable game. You look at Cincinnati, they lost 41-10 once Cincinnati started catching fire towards the end of the year, right?
Yep, that was Higgins.
But you think about it, that was a game where the defense let them down.
Yes.
And they scored 10 points.
So in that game was worse than 10 because
they shouldn't even had 10. That was like
35-0 at halftime.
That was like they
Cincinnati
had
basically
points.
gave them a touchdown at the end to get to 10.
And that's what I'm trying to say is that, no matter how that defense with TJ Watt, his Madden ranking is second to Myles Garrett, which is absolutely absurd in my mind. But you look at TJ Watt, you look at the secondary, you look at the potential for success in that defense. And the only way the Steelers are, and this is the thing about us, is that Steelers fans will take nothing less than a playoff berth. Steelers fans will take nothing less than a Super Bowl run, because we've taken nothing less than a playoff berth, and we've been one and done. We lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars during that year where they were like really friggin' good for
10 minutes,
whatever reason.
Yeah.
But why? What is holding them back from being the team that we want them to be, to give us a Santonio Holmes moment, to give us, that feeling again, that warm, fuzzy feeling like, you drink the last Iron City in the box. But what is missing? And if you look at from last year, okay, you're retooling the offensive line. You still have TJ Watt. You still have your skill position players. I'm not seeing anything that's exciting me that anything is going to be different next year, other than some of those wins could potentially be losses.
Yeah, and that's the variability of football. I mean, when it's only happens in 17 times, and we're just keeping track of it, does have this natural variability. And just historically, at least for the last 5 years, Steelers have led the league in sacks. First team ever to have 4 years in a row of it, and then they put another one on top of it. So the defense essentially is built as an all or nothing type of defense. When you have a super elite pass rusher, it's okay if there's holes elsewhere when it's a passing play. But when it's a running play and you need to hold all your lanes, that's where it really got gouged and showed. And the guy who showed it was Seattle last year. It was week 5 or 6, and the Steelers were up by 14 at halftime, and Seattle started the second half by running the ball. And they did it very successfully. Detroit, they stayed in that game by running the ball. Minnesota won that game by running the ball. And even in a weird way, so did the Chargers, because their quarterback ran the ball. So what they showed last year on defense was they couldn't stop the run. And the primary reason, at least the way that the Steelers defense is packaging, they couldn't stop the run, is because they're middle linebackers. So last year they had Joe Schobert come in right before camp. They now replaced him with Miles Jack. So basically we went from one Jacksonville middle linebacker to another. And we have the rookie that we traded up for, not the rookie anymore, but we have Bush that we traded up for. And we're just hoping that he'll be able to take on, because last year, basically, Mika Fitzpatrick had to play safety and middle linebacker. And because of the limitations between Schobert and Bush, it was almost like we were playing with 10 men on the field. And it really did show with runs up the middle.
Let's take a look at the schedule for next year. All right. You look at Tomlin has this terrible, terrible strategy of winning games that he should lose and losing games that he should win.
But on the net, he wins more than he should.
Right, but I want to speak this to existence to see what your thoughts and opinions are on this here.
All right.
So, first game of the season without preseason, Steelers versus Bengals. That game could go either way. In my mind, if you're looking at Cincinnati from last year being phenomenal, okay. You look at the Steelers wanting to play up. They play up to the big dogs. In this case, the Bengals are the big dog. That game could go either way. You can look at a Steelers close win by 3, or the Steelers could lose by 14. You look at the Patriots. Mac Jones, the second coming of Tom Brady. I think they're going to lose that game. I'm not saying that the Patriots are a better team. I'm just saying that the Steelers will somehow find a way. Thankfully, it's not in the winter. Will find a way to lose that game to Mac Jones.
Oh, he never loses the home opener.
Right.
Tomlin never loses the home opener.
I know they don't, but I'm saying that I wouldn't be surprised if in the last 5 minutes of that game that the Steelers are down by 7.
See, I believe that narrative much more 2 weeks later when the Jets are here.
Oh, no. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. Cleveland, the Cleveland games always, is Deshaun Watson going to play? If Deshaun Watson's not going to play and Jacoby Brissett's on the team, Steelers going to win that easy.
Yeah,
right?
They'll get 20 sacks.
Prime time, there's no way. There's no way they lose that game. The Jets.
Yeah, Tomlin does not lose in prime time.
Boy, the Jets game's going to be gross.
Yeah.
That's going to be disgusting. For whatever reason, my gut tells me they're going to lose that game. So you're looking at potentially two wins, 2 losses by week 4.
And you're going into Buffalo.
You're going into Buffalo. You're going to get gobsmacked by Buffalo. If Josh Allen is healthy, I know that the Steelers play up to competition.
Yeah, we're just going to assume everyone's healthy for the point of this conversation.
But I don't see that. I don't see anything that other than Mitch Trubisky knowing Buffalo's offense, I don't particularly see them winning that game with how good Buffalo's defense is and how good Buffalo's offense is. I don't see them winning that game at 1:00. I think that maybe they can make it close in the first half, but then Buffalo pulls away in the second half. So you're sitting there, 2 wins, 3 losses, going into week 6 at Tampa, or going into week 6 at home with Tampa. I think they can win that game.
Yep, that's the Tomlin.
But it makes me nervous.
Loss, let TJ go crazy.
It makes me nervous. Is Godwin going to be back? Is Mike Evans going to be healthy? And they just signed Julio Jones. Leonard Fournette is still a problem. Tom Brady is still Tom Brady. So they could potentially lose by 34 points in that game.
Yeah, or TJ could hurt them. And that's the miracle of this defense.
And that's the instance in time where you're looking at the defense to carry you, but you need Trubisky to finish. You need the touchdowns. You need the red zone appearances. You need Freiermuth in the red zone. That's a game that is that week 6 game is the choke point of the season.
Okay, so they go down to Miami for Sunday Night Football against Tua, which I arguably would say this is going to be
they're going to have a problem with
game of the year.
They're going to have a problem with Tyreek Hill. They've always had a problem with Tyreek Hill. The issue is that you're talking about Tyreek Hill from Tua instead of Patrick Mahomes to Tyreek Hill.
I don't think Tua can
Patrick
throw the ball
Mahomes is a better passer, but I don't think that Miami offers much offensively that you have to worry about anything other than Tyreek Hill.
That's fair.
So with Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, even though those other wide receivers, weren't name brand wide receivers, he could still get it around. And you had to worry about Travis Kelce. You have to worry about Gesicki and Tyreek Hill again, but obviously Tua is not as good of a passer as Patrick Mahomes. I think you win that game. Primetime, I think you win it. Philadelphia, you want to win the interstate battle, but Jalen Hurts, what are they going to do? What's that team going to look like? A.J. Brown has always had the Steelers number.
Mm-hmm.
So is Jalen Hurts going to be able to get A.J. Brown the ball? Jalen Hurts can escape pressure. So when you look at what T.J. Watt brings to the table, both Jalen Hurts and Tua, I'm not saying they fully negate it, but they definitely make it more of a challenge for T.J. Watt. Whereas when you look at Tampa Bay and Buffalo, you're looking at Tom Brady. He's not as mobile anymore, right? So that's where I'm saying that Tampa Bay could be the biggest win you have on the season there. But then you go down for the letdown look ahead sandwich, right? Miami, Philadelphia. Those games
and historically
you should win.
So going back to 2000, the city that Steelers had the lowest winning percentage on the road is at Philly. Now, granted, they don't go there very often, being the other conference, but it is the worst place that the Steelers go in terms of coming out a win. So,
and you're going into a bye week. You could be nursing like 5-6 injuries going into the bye week and give up at Philadelphia, right? So you're looking at potentially being, by that bye week, 4-4.
Yeah, which seems possible,
right? So when you look at the last legs of the season here, New Orleans, is Jameis Winston going to be healthy? Is Kamara coming back and playing?
Well, like I said, assuming that they're all healthy,
right?
You're coming off a bye week. This is where I look at the fact that you're coming from a dome in New Orleans into really stupid, cold, sleety, freezing. It will guarantee you that game will have freezing rain in it because that's mid-November and that's what Pittsburgh is.
Absolutely,
freezing rain.
You look at those two games, you could probably go 1-1.
I don't think he loses on. I think he wins after the bye, and I don't see us ever losing a night game.
Right.
So I can see those two going 2-2. I actually have a lot more faith in the second half of the season, despite the fact Baltimore's in it twice.
This is where it gets kind of gross. So Indianapolis at night on ESPN, Monday Night Football. Right? What's going to happen there?
You're going to find out if your run defense is fixed or not.
You're going to find out if Jonathan Taylor Thomas is who everybody thinks he is. You're going to find out if Matt Ryan has a great connection with Pittman, and you're going to find out if Leonard can get to your quarterback. So I'm just like you said, you don't lose at night. That game scares me for no other reason other than you just played Cincinnati. You're looking ahead at Atlanta and being like, oh, I can beat them. You're looking ahead at Baltimore and being like, oh, that's going to be a tough game. I think you overlook Indianapolis, and I think you'll lose.
See, I think you'll know the winner of the Colts game. You will know it based upon what Mixon does against us in the two games against Cincinnati, because their offenses are relatively similar. The skill talent is different, but Mixon is a quality runner. He's a tackle runner, just like Thomas, and both of them have just sit in the middle, not going to move quarterbacks in Burrow and Ryan.
But what you're looking,
if the defense can handle Cincinnati and Mixon in particular, the Colts won't do it. The Colts won't be able to pass.
This is what you're looking at after the bye week. Just like you said that you think that there's more, that you think more wins could come out of this bye week. What I'm saying is week 10 through week 17, you are facing 4, if all healthy, 4 out of the league's top 10 running backs.
Oh, yeah.
And you're already into the season. You're already tired. You've probably accumulated some injuries. But you are facing Kamara, Mixon, JTT, whatever Atlanta's got going on at that point in time. Baltimore, is Dobbins going to come back? And then you're facing Christian McCaffrey.
Baltimore's quarterback's the best running back on that team.
Right?
Yeah.
But you are now in the second half of the season, while all these guys have got their legs, and then you're facing Nick Chubb again, right? Yeah. So you are now at the point where you're potentially going into the bye 4-4, and you're facing the league's best four of the league's best rushers in the last 8 weeks of the season. You're facing arguably the best rushing quarterback in the league twice. You are facing Atlanta, who should be a win. I mean, let's be honest here. Other than Kyle Pitts and Cordarrelle Patterson, I couldn't really tell you another player on that team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and what's going to happen in Carolina? Is Carolina going to have a quarterback by the end of the year? Have they given up? Is Christian McCaffrey going to be on the shelf? Is Las Vegas going to pull a Las Vegas and turn it up at the end of the year and be pretty decent, right? So you're looking at the end of the year here again. You might even go 4-4 here too.
Yeah. So
you're looking at an 8-8, a potentially 8-8, potentially 9-7, maybe 10-6.
Yeah. So
but you've got to beat Baltimore
twice
at the end of the year, and then you got to go through Cleveland again. This is going to tell you by week 13 you're going to know if the Steelers are a playoff contender.
So it basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, with the exception of the quarterback, the people that you should look for if their injury is if Cam Heyward gets hurt, it's going to be the most devastating injury to the team, with the exception of the quarterback, because Cam Heyward is the only run stuffer they have, and the second half of that year is all running backs. Exactly,
and you're like I said, you could beat Atlanta, you could beat Las Vegas. Las Vegas still has Josh Jacobs. Right? Josh Jacobs isn't something to snuff at either. He's really good. You're looking at Las Vegas now, Derek Carr and Devontae Adams. Right? And you're looking at the end of the year here. And if you see what's here, New Orleans has Chris Olave, who, Jameis Winston loves to throw those balls, right? So, I mean, he's there. Michael Thomas is there. Kamara comes back. That's going to be rough. You're looking at Cincinnati, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. If they haven't fallen off, if Joe Burrow is healthy, boy, that's going to be rough. You're looking at Indianapolis, JTT, Michael Pittman. What's going to happen there? Atlanta, they don't have anybody. So I'm not even worried about that.
So at the end of the day, for those that play the suicide poll, the ones who you get one game with the Steelers to win, what is the one game you are most confident of the entire schedule that the Steelers will win?
Atlanta.
At Atlanta in week 13. And then you have a game that you guarantee the Steelers lose.
Guarantee the Steelers lose?
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo.
All right. So those are for the suicide players out there, the one game that will happen. We're going to come back on the other side of a little commercial break here, talk about real quickly the fantasy guys that you need to look for and avoid on the Steelers, as well as Bob's take on the broadcasters that announced the Steelers game. And when you come into Pittsburgh to watch a game, what should you do for your trip here to Pittsburgh and how it goes? This episode is sponsored by the podcast Father and Joe. Father and Joe aims to bring individuals into a better relationship with God. Each episode discusses an element of the human experience that we all can relate to, as well as questions about faith. What are indulgences? What's going on with purgatory? Why can I mentally grasp the concept of God, but I don't feel him in my heart? During each episode of Father and Joe, we are invited to enhance our relationships, and in doing so, we will improve ourselves and society. Download Father and Joe every Tuesday. Okay, Bob, here on the other side, let's take a look-see of some fantasy guys that you think are guys you want on your team, basically at all costs, maybe some guys that are sleepers, and as well as some guys that you should avoid. So with those three categories, just spitball me what you're thinking and who we got.
I mean, the guy that I want for the price that you can get him at, it's got to be Patty Freiermuth. I mean, you're looking at potentially really, really late in the draft. You're looking at, a season last year where if you're in a PPR league, he's gonna get the looks. He has to get the looks And, you're looking in PPR, he had about 60 catches. He didn't get the yards. He had the touchdowns. Those are what you're looking for from a tight end in the late rounds. You know that the guy isn't going to put up tremendous yardage. The guy relies on those touchdowns and those receptions. And I think when you look at Freiermuth in comparison to the other tight ends on the board that you can get, there's value there because you're filling when people are taking Kyle Pitts, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, you're taking guys that can fill out your roster better. When you're looking at these later rounds here, Freiermuth is there, you lock him up. I mean, he can only get better. I mean, you're only at 500 yards last year. He only didn't catch 19 of his targets, right? So you're looking for a volume to go up. You're hoping that volume goes up. You're hoping that he can get more in the red zone. I'm thinking that a safe number here is probably like 70 receptions, 600 yards, and probably about like 9 touchdowns. That looks like a safe number out of a tight end in the last couple of rounds. I mean, I'll take that. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
granted, there's going to be a couple weeks where he's going to throw out a stinker like he did last year, 11 yards, 1 catch, 7 yards, 2 catches, 11 yards, 4 catches, 22 yards, 5 catches with no touchdowns. But to be honest with you, that's what I expect from a guy. I mean, I'm not going to draft him. I might not draft him as my first tight end, but if I get into a predicament, then I would be okay with submarining that part of my roster in order to get depth at other positions and still have a guy like this that has the potential to go off each week. I mean, you look at against Chicago, 5 receptions, 43 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a great freaking week, right? 5 receptions, 31 yards. That's also a really good week from a tight end because the only tight ends that are going to be scoring points, ad nauseum is probably going to be Dalton Schultz. You're looking at Travis Kelce. You're looking at George Kittle if he stays healthy. You're looking at Mark Andrews, and you're looking at Kyle Pitts. That's 5 tight ends that you're going to have to take at least in the first 5 rounds. And you're looking at Freiermuth. You can get him later past the 10th round. And there's value there. The player that I'm not taking is Najee. Najee's value is not there in comparison to what you can get at that position or at that when you're drafting him. So, like I said, Najee had the year 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, and we don't know if that's his max, his ceiling or his floor. And if it is his ceiling, that's for our fantasy perspective. It's not awful. He had some receptions. You're looking at that, but at the point where you've got to draft him, you've got to make some tough decisions, right? You have the potential to be there with guys like Derrick Henry. You have the potential, if you really want him, you've got to take him in that. You've got to be part of the first 8 picks of your draft in a 10-teamer. You've got to be probably first, 11 in a 12-teamer because that does change it a little bit. I'm not saying that, if he comes to me that I wouldn't consider taking him. I'm just saying that at that point, you've got to give yourself a valuation. Is do you think he holds more value? And we talked about this before. Do the Steelers get into the red zone more? And the same thing with Pat Freiermuth goes for Najee Harris. If the Steelers can get into the red zone consistently and more often, those touchdown numbers are going to go up for both of these players. If they don't, you're looking at a similar season as last year. If they do,
and based upon everything you said, thinking they're going to get an 8-win season, that you're not confident that they're going to be getting into the red zone more often. So okay, so that was the fantasy takes right there. So Bob, one thing we ask everyone here who comes on the show is, what do you think about the broadcasters? Who's your favorite broadcaster to cover a Steelers game, and who's the one you're least happy when they're the ones in the booth?
I mean, we all know that we don't have a very loving relationship with Chris Collinsworth. I mean, he's been around when a game is on and he's the announcer. You kind of are like, I could go with volume off. It doesn't really bother me at all. But I don't really have a favorite announcer. I mean, it's for other sports, yeah, but historically speaking, I mean, it's the product on the field, and I would rather have a good product on the field and not worry about what the talking heads are saying. I want to see good play from the Steelers on the field.
Perfect. And then as the last kind of segment here, someone who's coming into Pittsburgh for the first time, what do they need to go and check out during their trip to Heinz Field and watching the Steelers?
I mean, it is AccuSure Stadium now, so you've got to get that. Yeah. You've got to get that into your language there. So it's going to be much different seeing that AccuSure Stadium logo instead of the Heinz Field logo when you're up on Mount Washington, right? Beautiful overlooks. You take PJ McCardle Roadway up. You can take the incline up as well. And all along, Grandview Avenue, you've really got a beautiful view of the city. Go up at nighttime, the day before the game. Maybe go up after the game if it's a day game, and just take a look down at all the lights that are on in the city. Hopefully, everybody came into the office, so the lights are on. You might even go up to Squirrel Hill. If you are a foodie, Pittsburgh has a lot of great restaurants that, if you're downtown, take a look at, Bebe's Kitchen. That's Korean food. They've got great Korean fried chicken. You've got places in the Strip District that have phenomenal, American food. Squirrel Hill, like I said, has a great collection of Asian restaurants. You can find Thai, Chinese, Southern, Szechuan food. You could find Northern Chinese food, get a bubble tea. Pittsburgh has a lot of unique things going on for it. Unlike a lot of other cities, our neighborhoods are very much connected to one another. So you can be in one place, and then 2 minutes later, you're all of a sudden in a different place with a different vibe. I mean, personally, that's, people talk up the East End a lot, East Liberty, places on Penn Avenue, but it really is one of those things where just see what your gut tells you to do, to take a drive around. I mean, we're a relatively safe city. Downtown, whereas other people's downtowns are really, really, really bustling, ours is kind of okay, right? It's just okay. There's a lot of good restaurants, like I said. There's a couple bars that are arcade bars. Definitely take a look at Kickback Cafe in Lawrenceville on Butler Street. It's a nice little pinball cafe. You've got Pins and Pints, I believe it is called. It just came up on the North Shore. Take a look at Southern Tier Brewing. It's the people there, you can't go wrong. I mean, if you're here for food and you're here for football and a great view, you're in the right place. We've got museums. I mean, Pittsburgh is a must-see city, but living here my whole life, like I've seen a lot of it, right? And you've seen a lot of it as well. So people say, get a permane sandwich. You got to get a permane sandwich. And I would tell you, you don't really have to get a permane sandwich.
I disagree with that.
It's good, but you got to go to the right place for it. You can't get one in the stadium. You got to go to the place down in the Strip District. It's in an alleyway. Go get yourself a donut. Go get yourself a permane sandwich from inside that alleyway. Permane's. That is the permane's among all permane's.
The Strip District one, without a doubt. There's no doubt about that.
You could go to the waterfront one. They make a good sandwich too. You can go see a movie over at Lowe's, at the AMC Lowe's. But what I'm saying is, if you're going to do a permane sandwich, you got to do it in a restaurant. You can't do it at the stadium. It is not the same. You can even try it yourself. Go to both. Get both. But I'm telling you, there are plenty of other places to eat at if you're looking for a meal that are leaps and bounds better than a permane sandwich. I'm not saying it's not good.
We're just going to let you take that one as the final take here. And we hope everyone enjoyed watching. If you do want to become part of the program as a guest on a future episode, you can find that link here in the description, as well as helping to help us grow. Please click subscribe, share, and if